Shalom. So, in this breaking forth through obedience, we agree on one thing, that for there to be breaking forth for you as an individual, as a child of God, you must walk in total obedience. If there is no obedience to God, there is no breaking forth. And that is why Prophet Jeremiah reminds the children of Israel that what God spoke to their fathers in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 21, 22, 23, that I never spoke to you about burnt offerings and sacrifices. God, through Jeremiah, tells them, I only spoke to you about obedience. Because if there's no obedience, there's no breaking forth. Even Jesus himself, let me say this, Jesus had to separate himself from the things of this world for him to be totally obedient to the Father and to hear the Father's voice as he spoke to him. Where do we get all this? Where am I getting this? What I'm saying? Because he had to separate himself from the things of this world. For him to be totally obedient. Even Jesus had to be totally obedient to the Father. Let's start from the book of Luke chapter 2. The book of Luke chapter 2 verse 52. Please follow me for you to understand what I'm saying or my claims according to the Bible. Luke chapter 2 verse 52. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And I learned the word wisdom. Jesus increased in wisdom. Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Now, he increased in wisdom. In the book of Proverbs chapter 9 verse 10, the Bible speaks about wisdom and what wisdom is. Proverbs 9 verse 10, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. I repeat again, but A is what I'm interested with. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if Jesus increased in wisdom, it means in him there was the fear of the Lord. And where there is fear of the Lord, there is separating yourself from the things of this world. If there's going to be fear of God in you, then you will not do things according to the prince of this world. You will not be a child of disobedience. You will be a child of obedience. So Jesus himself, he had to separate himself from the things of this world. Yes, he increased in wisdom. And wisdom, the fear of God, is the beginning of wisdom. So if he increased in wisdom, then he walked in total obedience to the Father. Come on, pay attention. Pay attention. He walked in total obedience to the Father. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 5, verse 8, the Bible says, though he were a son, Apostle Paul here, the author of this book of Hebrews, is talking about Jesus. And he says, though he were a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Jesus learned obedience by the things that he suffered. He was a son, yes, but he learned obedience, meaning he walked in total obedience, and he was not an exception. He went through sufferings. Even though he was a son, he learned obedience. And by the way, obedience is learned. Yes, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, Brethren, learn obedience. Learn obedience, because without obedience, there's no breaking forth. Without, God does not walk with disobedient children. That is why Jesus, even in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, this cup, Lord, all things are possible with you. Take it away from me. But he said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. What's happening there? He is submitting to God's will. Because obedience is also submitting to the will of the Father. He says, Daddy, not my will. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. A man that is walking in total obedience only says one thing. Not my will, but your will be done. Jesus demonstrates a walk of total obedience to the Father when he says, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Remember, he was God. So he saw the cup ahead. He saw the crown of thorns. He saw how they would beat him, how they would insult him, and he has to keep quiet. He said, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Jesus walked in total obedience to the Father. Now, it's only the obedience in Jesus that made him to do exploits and to do God's assignment. Do you want to do exploits? Do you want to be valiant through God? It's only in obedience, or it's only the obedience in Jesus that made him to do exploits. It's only the obedience in you that will make you do exploits. Come on. It's only the obedience in you. If you walk in disobedience, no exploits for you. God does not walk with disobedient children. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, with all humility, master obedience. God does not take obedience lightly. The way we think that God can take it up lightly. God will not close his eyes when it comes to obedience. He checks. Are you obedient? Can you be obedient to me? Because if you are not obedient to God, he can't walk with you. Oh, I wish there was an easier way. I wish the grace of God would remove obedience. But it can't. There's no shortcut. Bible says the grace of God has appeared to all men, teaching us to say no to all iniquity. Grace will teach you obedience, how to walk in obedience to the Father and not walk in disobedience and think that you can have your way. Do you want to walk in exploits? Do you want to do God's assignment? Then you have to master obedience. King Saul failed in that area of obedience. And when God would have established his kingdom and his kingship in Israel forever, he was found wanting. Why? He walked in disobedience. Did he obey a little? Yes. Did he obey some percentage? Yes. So he was partially obedient? Yes. But partial obedience, according to us, is disobedience to God. That's why he walked in a little obedience, according to us, man. But according to God, he never obeyed God. He walked in disobedience. And God tells him, obedience is better than sacrifice. And that's why Jeremiah reminds the children of Israel. He said, when I spoke to your fathers, I never spoke to them about burnt offerings and sacrifices. I only spoke to them about obedience. Obey my commandments, that I'll be your God